Welcome to Daily with Doc and Becca. This program is for educational purposes only. The statements in this program have not been evaluated by the FDA. The content is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, nor is it intended to take the place of your primary care physician. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual sharing their testimony and may not be typical. We do not make any regarding health or income. As an empowered individual, you do have options available. We are honored to have the founding father of the science of epigenetics, guiding us with the best options to obtain or maintain optimal, Dr. Joel Wallach. Welcome to Daily with Doc and Becca. This program is for educational purposes only. The statements in this program have not been evaluated by the FDA. The content is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, nor is it intended to take the place of your primary care physician. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual sharing their testimony. Results vary and may not be typical. We do not make any claims regarding health or income. As an empowered individual, you do have options available. We are honored to have the founding father of the science of epigenetics guiding us with the best options to obtain or maintain optimal health. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Daily with Doc and Becca. My name is Becca Dukes, the producer and hostess of this program that is a resource for an amazing community. This community consists of health coaches, certified holistic health coaches, people that are just enthusiasts or just want to help you thrive because they're tired of seeing you just barely surviving. This program is being sponsored by dailywithdoc.com. And if you have not been referred to this program by somebody specific, you can go to that website. You'll find a store, you'll find free, and you'll also find articles to help you be more empowered so that you can be a better health authority on your own behalf. As a producer and hostess of this program, I am also the Director of Student Services for the Institute of Holistic Health, where we teach about the 4 areas of health, how they're affected by nutritional deficiencies, solutions, and that's just the beginning, folks. If you'd like more information about the Certified Holistic Health Coach course, go to coach.dailywithdoc.com. Let's go ahead and get started, as I'm super excited to be able to be back with you. And Friday, it is Pharmacist Fridays on Daily with Doc, and I absolutely love, and this is my favorite pharmacist, probably of all times, that we have with us here on the Daily with Doc program. Not just because he agrees to come on, but he's just an overall great person who cares about others and helping them have the information that they can make the right decisions on their own behalf. Now, Pharmacist Ben holds a bachelor's in broadcasting broadcast journalism from Syracuse University. He has a bachelor's science in pharmacy from the University of Colorado. He is a compound pharmacist. And his expertise includes compounding custom medications, specializing in skin health, formulating nutritional products, and consulting with doctors and patients. He graduated from pharmacy school in 1982 and has been practicing for over 40 years. 40 years, sharing great information, learning about what he learned in school. And then also, which I think one thing that they learn about school and pharmacy school is more about nutrition than what the medical establishment learns about nutrition. So I'm super excited that he's sharing that information with us. So since 1991, he has been lecturing nationwide on the strategic use of cosmetics and nutritional supplementation for healthy skin and bodies, has written hundreds of articles, recorded hundreds of short videos and radio spots, and he also speaks regularly on Coast to Coast. Since 1913, Ben has been on the Longevity's Advisory Board. He specializes in using nutritional supplements where other healthcare practitioners rely on toxic pharmaceutical drugs, and his approach views the human body as a healing and regenerating system designed to renew itself continually with the right raw ingredients. So these raw ingredients, folks, include nutrition and nutritional supplementations. And if you are seeking health in the 21st century America, consider a nutritional program like the one that we're going to be discussing today on Daily with Doc. So without further ado, Pharmacist Ben Fuchs, hello and welcome to Daily with Doc.
So nice to see you, Becca. And I have not been on the scientific board since 1913, although that was a very good year. I have been on
2013.
I'm old, but I'm not that old, Becca Dukes.
Sorry.
Just teasing. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And yes, we pharmacists do study nutrition, unbeknownst to the average person. Certainly, folks on this call know that there's a nutritional pharmacists can provide, and that is because nutrients are the perfect medicines. They're not as potent as drugs, and sometimes we get deluded by the fact that pharmaceuticals are much more potent than nutrition. We get deluded into feeling, oh well, drug, and even doctors do, not just us, not just lay people, that nutrients can't come close to drugs, and drugs have much more research behind them, and you'll often hear medical folks say, well, there's no studies associated with this, and it's kind of interesting because they do talk out of both sides of their mouth, because on the one hand they'll kind of marginalize or dismiss the power of nutrition for modifying biological processes and sicknesses and disease, but on the other hand they'll tell you don't take your nutrients while you're on drugs because they may interfere with your medications, or they make your medication somehow less effective, which I always laugh at, and makes me kind of ironic. I always feel that that's kind of ironic, like saying, oh, well, you don't want the nutrients because they'll interfere with your poisons. Well, as it turns out, the nutrients will, for the most part, with some exceptions, for the most part, make your drugs more potent, more powerful, and more effective. And if you do start a nutritional supplement program and you're on medication, you want to let your physician know, because your medication may be much more effective or much more powerful. So if you have high blood pressure, for example, and you're on a beta blocker, and then you start using magnesium and niacin and vitamin E and other nutrients for lowering your blood pressure, your beta blocker, whatever your antihypertensive drug is, may actually be more potent. And you may actually find your blood pressure dropping even more significantly because now you're on nutrients, which of course leads you to the obvious conclusion: why don't we just wean ourselves off our medication and use nutrients instead? Which seems like the obvious conclusion that one would draw. And indeed, I always tell people that if you're on a prescription drug chronically, and that is, by chronically I mean not a pain pill or not an antibiotic, which has a terminal date, but one of these medications where they say you're going to be on this the rest of your life, blah, blah, blah. Your number one health goal should be to figure out how to wean yourself off of that drug. There's no such thing as a drug that does not have side effects, that does not have adverse reactions, and that most insidiously of all will not eventually drain nutritional resources out of your body. Remember, this is really a very important point because it doesn't show up on in the PDR and the package insert. The package insert, by the way, is what comes with all drugs. The pharmacists usually throw those out, but you should always ask for the package insert if you're on a prescription drug so you can read up on whatever drug you're taking. And package inserts will always have adverse reactions and side effects associated with them, and they'll always be listed on the package insert. But what won't be listed is secondary toxicity, side effects, adverse reactions that are associated with nutritional deficiencies that are caused by a drain on your nutritional resources as the body attempts to detoxify that medication. And this detoxification of medication is your testimony to the fact that these things are nasty. And whether or not they're incredibly toxic and incredibly nasty, like a blood thinner perhaps, or a cardiovascular drug or antihypertensive, which tend to be among the most powerful drugs in the pharmacopoeia, certainly chemotherapy, you can add that to the list, or whether they're just mildly toxic, like a Motrin or a Tylenol or even an aspirin. Nonetheless, the body regards that molecule as something that needs to be removed, eliminated. Get these Satan behind me. That's what the body says when it sees these, a benign, a relatively benign substance like aspirin or Tylenol or Motrin, or a much more significantly toxic substance like a blocker or cardiovascular drug, or something that really has a powerful effect on biochemistry. Regardless, there's always going to be a drain on nutrients required to detoxify a substance. So, for example, you may take, just to give you an example, a calcium channel blocker for your heart. Well, that calcium channel blocker, as all drugs, blocks or inhibitors, suppresses, shuts down the heart function. If you're wondering why would a healthcare professional ever want to shut down the heart's function, this is the logic dealing with heart disease, to suppress cardiovascular functioning so that it doesn't work as hard, basically kind of poisoning the heart. So this calcium channel blocker has to be detoxified using magnesium, using vitamin C, using copper, using zinc. Now, ironic is it the fact that copper and zinc and magnesium that are responsible to vitamin C, that are responsible for clearing out calcium channel blocker, which you take for your heart, are among the heart's most important nutrients. So the absurdity of situation can't be missed if you start to dive deep into it, because most lay people don't, and certainly most doctors don't dive deep into what's happening here. And that's why I have gone on record as saying that I am a nutritional pharmacist, and I'm proud to use nutrients where other healthcare practitioners use toxic pharmaceutical drugs. Now, I'm passionate about this, and I've told a story when I had a surgery for my knee. I was all about morphine. That's all I wanted. Morphine. I was praising God for morphine because I think there's no nutrient this could touch morphine when it comes to having a surgical procedure or having some kind of horrible accident or trauma to your body. So I recognize that there are certain needs for nutrients. Again, there are certain needs for those. Of course, we know there's problems with painkillers and the problem with antibiotics too. So even the drugs that are important and necessary have their own toxicity, side effects, and problems associated with using them. So bottom line is, if you're on a prescription drug for a long period of time, you don't want to challenge you how to wean yourself off, number one. Number two, if you want a short-term drug like a painkiller or antibiotic, you want to set that medication and use as judiciously as possible. Number three, if you are on a prescription drug, you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of nutrition as well, not only to help mitigate these side effects and adverse reactions that are associated with the prescription drug, but even to make that prescription drug more potent so you can reduce your dose at the very least, and ideally wean yourself off of that medication completely. So everybody out there who's using it, who's distributing or who's using it, should recognize it's not the case that nutrients will interfere with your drugs. Nutrients will protect you from your drugs and ultimately make drugs work more effectively so you can wean yourself off of those prescription medications. And that's very important because that's one of the common questions I get is, will this interfere with my medication? Yes, it will interfere with medication in a positive way. And sense that you'll be able to wean yourself off, eventually wean yourself off the medication.
So, Pharmacist Ben, you mentioned that insert that talks about things
Yes.
that,
Yes.
that are the side effects and the secondary side effects.
Yes.
Let's talk about things that we do in our body's natural repair kit when it comes to connective tissue.
Okay. Yeah, so here's the connective tissue. Tissue is a very kind of science word. A lot of people sort of tune out when they hear this kind of words. Let's talk stuff. Tissue is stuff. The body is made of stuff. Everything's made of stuff in the body. It's tissue. Tissue equals stuff. There's 4 types of stuff, i.e. tissue. In the body, you have the bulk of the body, which is the core of the body. And if you ever want the body's exhibit at the museum, you know what I'm talking about. I call it the flesh robot, and that is the meat inside the body. Most of our body, over 90% of our body, is the meat portion. And then the meat portion is electrified with wiring, electrical wiring. We call that nervous tissue. And then the meat, the flesh robot, and the electrified meat robot is coated with covering. The skin is part of that covering. That's called epithelial tissue. And epithelial tissue is found throughout the body. That epithelial tissue, while coating in your eyes, for example, epithelial tissue in your skin, as I say, is made of epithelial tissue. Your nails are epithelial tissue. There's also a version of epithelial tissue inside the body, and that's also a covering, because you got to have coverings inside the body too, and that covering inside the body, that covering substance inside the body is called endothelial tissue. And this endothelial tissue is especially important to the blood vessels, because the blood vessels are lined with endothelial tissue, and damage to the endothelial tissue of the blood vessels accounts for a lot of health misery and shortened longevity when it comes to cardiovascular disease, particularly high blood pressure, cholesterol deposits and calcium deposits, scleroses, and clogged arteries. These are all functions of deteriorating endothelial tissue. That's a whole nother story. The body is the bulk of the body is the center, the core, the flesh robot. It's electrified and then it's covered. So the most important part, if you just logically think about it, is not the covering and it's not the electrical wiring. It's the bulk, the core, the body's exhibit. And the core, the bulk of the body's exhibit is a combination. And I say combination meaning that the 2 parts are integrated with each other. These 2 types of stuff or 2 types of tissue. It's a little difficult to tease them apart because they're connected. They're so interactive. They interface with each other, and the one part affects the other part, and the other part affects the first part, and that's the muscle tissue, and that's the part of the body that allows us to move, to be dynamic, and the most important part, which is the connective tissue. And the connective tissue and the muscle tissue together form the flesh robot. If you can use your imagination and picture this center, like at the body's exhibit, that's the connective tissue and muscle tissue part of the body. And without meaning to be gross, if you did a cross section and cut it across this way and pull that out, you know what you'd have? You'd have a steak. That's what a steak is. A steak is muscle tissue and then the connective tissue, which is wrapped around. And if you could picture how that all works together, you can kind of see how those 2 pieces, those 2 components of the body are interrelated. So the connective tissue and the muscle tissue form the flesh robot. It is the connective tissue, however, that is the critical piece of the puzzle. And all of the things we hate about the aging process, about getting older, are all about deteriorating connective tissue, which means building connective tissue is the very essence of anti-aging. And focusing on the connective tissue is the single most important thing you could do to not only slow down the aging process, but to allow yourself to age more gracefully. Because the things that we hate about the aging process, including the immobility and the pain and the difficulty moving and the cardiovascular disease, the vascular problems, the arterial problems, the venous problems, and the skin problems, and the wrinkles, and the osteoporosis, and all of the things that you think about when you think about the difference between your child or grandchild and your grandmother are all about the connective tissue. So building the connective tissue is the critical piece of anti-aging. And also, not just building the connective tissue, but preventing the deterioration of the connective tissue, because taking care of the connective tissue involves slowing down the breakdown as well as improving or increasing the facility of the buildup. It's a reduction of the breakdown and an increase in the buildup. You need them both if you want to strengthen your connective tissue. And just to give you an example of how misunderstood this is, there's many things that we do that we think are going to strengthen our bodies or our connective tissue, when in reality, our connective tissue isn't really affected by these strategies. For example, there's a lot of people out there who are using calcium to make their bones strong. Well, guess what, folks? Osteoporosis is a connective tissue disease. It's not a calcium disorder. It's about the connective tissue because the bones are made of connective tissue, and the deterioration of the bones that's associated with osteoporosis is exactly the same as the deterioration of the connective tissue in your skin when you have wrinkles. Osteoporosis is wrinkles of the bone. It's the same phenomena. And in fact, deterioration of the body, degeneration of the body that involves connective tissue is the same whether that connective tissue is in the face or the skin, or whether it's in the bone, or whether it's in the fascia, which wrap around all of the organs of the body, or whether that connective tissue is in the vascular system, or whether that connective tissue is in the heart. It's the same thing. And so the idea of using calcium to build your bones, when you don't use calcium to make your skin have less wrinkles, or you don't use calcium to prevent ruptures and hernias, just shows you what a failed idea this is, or at least less than ideal strategy it is to just take calcium to strengthen your bones. Now, by the way, calcium is incredibly important and plays a very important role in the body, not just for your bones or your teeth or your skeletal system. It also is the way cells turn on or are activated. Calcium is your cell turn on mineral, and that's really where calcium plays such an important part, although it is obviously involved in building bone. But by understanding the bone as part of the connective tissue system, all of a sudden it gives us a completely different strategy for preventing osteoporosis or preventing weakening of the bones. And it gives us an understanding on how we can build the entire connective tissue system. Because when you use strategies to build your bone, connective tissue building strategies to build your bone, you get less wrinkles. You get a stronger vascular system. You get a more functional heart, and you get better connection of all of the organs of the body. The connective tissue, of course, at the end of the day, connects things. The way it connects things is by allowing cells to become unified, and indeed allowing all the organs of the body to become unified. What do I mean by that? Cells are little entities. They're little animals. And if you take a cell out of your gum and or your cheek, and you put it in a petri dish, and you put food in that petri dish, the little cell will crawl towards the food, and it'll envelop the food like it's eating it, and it will assimilate the food just like a little animal. And vice versa, if you put a poison in the petri dish, the cell will run away, just like a little animal. And that cell is a little independent being. However, we know in the body, it loses its independence so that it can take one for the team. So it could be part of the community, part of the society, and part of the network. And the way the body is structured, all of the individual animals, if you will, cells, are unified into a human body by a connecting force, which is the connective tissue. And the connective tissue functions as a matrix within which all the cells sit. And the same thing is true about all the organs. All the organs sit within this connective tissue matrix. In fact, it literally is called the matrix. And in Latin, matrix means womb or mother. And so you can kind of vision the matrix, the connective tissue matrix, as a womb in which all of the cells sit and all of the organs sit. They're nestled inside the connective tissue the way a baby is nestled in the womb, in the uterus of a mother. And so the connective tissue is quite literally the mother, or at least the womb, of all of the cells and all of the organs, which tells you that when your connective tissue begins to deteriorate, you're going to have a problem with all of the organs and all of the cells, because now the womb is starting to deteriorate. And just like a womb feeds a baby, and just like a womb oxygenates a baby, and just like a womb detoxifies a baby and drains away all the toxicity from the baby's metabolic processes, guess what? That's what the matrix does as well. The matrix, the connective tissue matrix within which all of the cells are embedded and all of the organs are embedded, feeds the cells, oxygenates the cells, and detoxifies the cells. And as we've said many times, you're probably getting sick of hearing me say, all disease is cell disease. Well, it turns out that there's only three things a cell needs. So if cells are diseased, they're not getting one of these three things. What is it that a cell needs? It's not a lot. A cell needs food, i.e. nutrition. It needs oxygen to fuel its biochemistry and biochemical processes, and it needs a clean place to do its work. How does the cell accomplish these functions? How is it fed? How is it oxygenated? How is it detoxified? Through the matrix, through the connective tissue. So if all disease is cell disease, and all cell disease is the end result of starvation, suffocation, and toxification, and it's the connective tissue that feeds and oxygenates and detoxifies the cells, you can see how connective tissue deterioration is going to be a problem, and how keeping the connective tissue healthy and strong is the solution to the problem of accelerated degeneration and shortened longevity and the disease process. In fact, cancer itself, the big kahuna, the big monster of all diseases, progresses via the deterioration of connective tissue. There are chemicals that a cancer cell will make that will break up the connective tissue, that will destroy the connective tissue. This is how metastases occurs. Under ordinary circumstances, the connective tissue will keep cancer cells from spreading, from metastasizing. So cancer, being this brilliant evolution, from an evolutionary perspective, brilliant mechanism, cancer cells have evolved chemicals that will drill through the connective tissue so that they can spread, which is kind of interesting, which tells you why building connective tissue, which is just another reason why building connective tissue is so darn important. Now, I said earlier that there's two ways to think about building connective tissue. One is putting things in the body that build connective tissue, and the other thing is taking things away from the body that accelerate the deterioration of the connective tissue. And there's a lot of things that we human beings love to do that destroy connective tissue. One of the worst things a human being can do, and arguably the worst thing a human being can do on a regular basis voluntarily to their bodies, is smoke cigarettes. And smoking is one of the worst things for your connective tissue, and you can actually even observe a connective tissue deterioration in the face of smokers. And people who have been smoking cigarettes for a long period of time, by long period, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, will have visible changes in their connective tissue that you can see. And you can actually see when just by looking visually, you can see when somebody's been smoking for many years, because their connective tissue is starting to deteriorate in their skin very dramatically. And this is where the significant wrinkling that smokers will have, particularly around the lip area, comes from, is deterioration of the connective tissue, because smoking destroys connective tissue. Secondly, sugar destroys connective tissue via a chemical process called glycation, which I'm sure you've heard of. Becca just wrote a wonderful book with Doc called Metabolic, that describes all of the things that can go wrong with the body following excess ingestion of sugar and disruptions in how the body processes sugar via insulin. Sugar itself has a damaging effect on the connective tissue above and beyond its impact on insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. It has a mechanically destructive effect on the connective tissue. And that's the second thing that you want to be careful of if you're a sugar eater, if you're eating a lot of sugar, that sugar can be problematic. And the third element that destroys connective tissue, and this is especially problematic, is toxicity that gets into the bloodstream through a leaky gut or intestinal permeability, as we've talked about so many times. One of the things that the connective tissue functions as is as a trash can, as a repository for toxicity. And the blood, when toxicity enters into the blood, one of the ways the blood cleans itself is by dumping toxicity off into the connective tissue. Now, obviously, that's a problem because now you have toxicity in the connective tissue, but to the body, the blood is more important so that the blood will clean itself out by dumping its toxins off into the connective tissue. Of course, now you have a problem in that you have toxicity and immune factors in the connective tissue. And guess what? Toxicity and immune factors in the connective tissue will cause inflammation and will cause immune reactions that will further deteriorate connective tissue. And they will also initiate immune reactions for the connective tissue. So that once you get toxicity that's dumped out into the blood, into the connective tissue, now the connective tissue looks like the enemy. It's distorted. It has bad guys in it. Guess what happens then? The immune system will now attack the connective tissue. If you understand what I just said, you are smarter than most physicians, because most physicians will tell you there's no known cause for this phenomenon. Once the connective tissue is attacked, then you end up with further deterioration of the connective tissue, further inflammation, further loss of movement, further loss of functionality, further loss of cellular and organ health, because it's the connective tissue that feeds and oxygenates and detoxifies the cells. And this is all secondary to toxicity in the blood. Classic example, this is a condition that's one of the most miserable conditions a human being could ever endure, and that's called rheumatoid arthritis. And if you go to your rheumatologist or your endocrinologist or your orthopedic physician, whoever it is you're going for your rheumatoid arthritis, they'll say, there's no known cause. It just happens. Oh, your mother had rheumatoid arthritis, so you're going to have rheumatoid arthritis. In other words, completely oblivious to this mechanism, which is pretty darn easy to understand, that I just explained to you. So if you have rheumatoid arthritis or connective tissue autoimmune disease and you go to your doc, you might want to explain to them how this phenomenon occurs through leaky gut and through problems at the level of the intestine or perhaps upstream. So working on the connective tissue is a combination of, number one, what you're putting in, and number two, what you don't want to put. The health of the stomach acid, bile salts, liver health, pancreatic health, etc. We've talked about that a lot. So it's not just working at the level of the intestine. To add to the problems associated with leaky gut and connective tissue deterioration is the fact that connective tissue deterioration is going to affect the intestine itself, because the intestinal integrity is maintained by connective tissue. So when your connective tissue is deteriorating, it's going to deteriorate globally, systemically through the whole body. It's also going to deteriorate in the intestine, and that's going to make leaky gut worse. So what you're putting in, we'll talk about that in a second. What you shouldn't be putting in, we'll talk about that in a second. Building connective tissue is the very essence of anti-aging. So how do you do it? What do you do to build the connective tissue? Well, ironically or interestingly, the most important nutrient for building connective tissue, the capital T, not arguable, the most important nutrient for building connective tissue is a nutrient that we all know about, but because of the insidious RDAs, most people don't get anywhere near enough of this nutrient for building the connective tissue. not set up to keep us healthy. It's set up to keep us from dying. That's not a bad thing, obviously, but when we misunderstand or misconstrue the lack of dying with good health, we set the bar so low on what's available to us for health. We're just satisfied not being dead. And the medical strategy, the medical model, the representatives of the medical strategy and medical model, they don't care about your health. They care that you're not dead, which is fine if you just don't want to be dead. But if you want to be healthy and strong and vital, it's not enough to not be dead. You want a classic example of how satisfied the medical model is with keeping us dead, or keeping us alive and just not having us dead. Think about chemotherapy, or think about people who are kept alive on machines, even though they're not really alive. They're just kept alive on machines because to the medical model, death is the big enemy. And whether or not you're thriving, whether or not you're vital, whether or not you're have a beautiful, wonderful quality of life is irrelevant. That's on us. And by us, I mean us as individuals, and I also mean us as longevity distributors. That's what we do. We don't save you from being dead. We give you life and life more abundantly. That's the mission of longevity and the mission of nutritional supplementation. It's not just to keep you from being dead. To keep you from being dead, that's the pharmacomedical model. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing if the option is being dead. But if the option is having a great life, we want a great life. And there's nothing in the medical model's bag of tricks that can give you a great life. That's on us. As far as the connective tissue goes, as far as building the connective tissue, the nutrient that is the most important nutrient, not arguable, the most important nutrient for building connective tissue is a nutrient whose RDA is set so low because you don't need a lot of this nutrient to prevent the occurrence and development of one of the worst diseases known to man. And this is a disease that we don't really have anymore because people are getting this trace amount of nutrients. So we don't really have this disease, but this was a disease that used to kill a lot of people a mere 400 or 500 years ago. People would drop dead all the time of this disease, and not just drop dead, they would die the most horrible death because this was a disease that was marked by connective tissue deterioration. In other words, that flesh robot would begin to deteriorate. So not only would your bones dissolve and would your blood vessels explode and would your heart stop working as effectively and would ulcerations start to appear on your skin, but indeed, because the connective tissue is what feeds all the cells and all the organs of the body, you'd suffer from organ dysfunction of all kinds. And in fact, all of the cells of your body would start to work less effectively. And it was one of the most horrible diseases known to man until it was discovered that all you needed was a little piece of fruit once a day and you wouldn't get that disease. Of course, I'm talking about a disease called scurvy, right? And so scurvy used to kill a lot of people via connective tissue deterioration. That's what happens when you have scurvy. And in fact, the way you die from scurvy is you would hemorrhage to death. You'd bleed to death because your blood vessels would explode. But before that happened, you'd be suffering the most incredible misery and pain that you could imagine. And then it was discovered that a little bit of fruit would eliminate scurvy. In fact, the most susceptible population for getting scurvy were sailors, because sailors used to subsist on canned biscuits and canned meat. That was how they preserved meat on the ships, or salted meat on the ships. They didn't eat a lot of fruit. And so sailors were susceptible to scurvy to such an extent that sometimes a boat would go out with a ship would go out, leave port with a couple hundred sailors on it, and then would come back to port with 10 sailors on it because everybody died of scurvy. That's how predominant and how awful this illness was until it was discovered that a little bit of citrus fruit would end scurvy. Of course, we know the story. Today, citrus fruits are recognized as a source of vitamin C for preventing scurvy, but it's nowhere near enough vitamin C. In fact, the recommended daily allowance of vitamin C is around 100 milligrams a day. And that's great if you want to prevent scurvy, but it's not enough to build connective tissue maximally. And in fact, if you understand the relationship between connective tissue deterioration and aging, you can do a quick leap in your head and realize that aging is very similar to scurvy. And aging is like a subclinical scurvy. And the signs of scurvy, the gum disease and the weakened bones and the deteriorating vasculature and the heart problems and the skin problems, all of these are very similar to what happens when we get old. We get weak bones, we get weak muscles, we get weak skin, we get weak vasculature. So a very compelling case can be made for aging itself as being a form of subclinical scurvy. And if vitamin C is the most important nutrient, is the most important nutrient for building connective tissue, it's also the most important anti-aging nutrient. And that's one of the reasons I love this stuff so much. It's absolutely packed with vitamin C, not based on the ridiculous deprivation allowance. You're getting almost 10 times the vitamin C of the ridiculous deprivation allowance per dose. And this is one of the reasons, among many others, why I think Beyond Tangy Tangerine is the most incredible nutritional supplement a human being could ever ingest, and it's ever been formulated. But there's many other ways to build connective tissue. While vitamin C is the most important nutrient, there's other nutrients that are important for building connective tissue. The connective tissue at the end of the day is protein, specifically a protein called collagen. So ingesting more protein, particularly ingesting collagen protein, connective tissue protein, is also important for building connective tissue. Youngevity's got some great products, of course, collagen peptides themselves, whey protein, the TMR shake, which I absolutely love. There's also the Fit Shake that you can use. These are also very important for getting the connective tissue, for building connective tissue, as providing building blocks of connective tissue. And of course, one of the most underappreciated of all the Youngevity products, and one of the most multifunctional at the same time, the glucogel caps. You do need to take quite a few of those glucogel caps, but the glucogel caps are also very important for helping build the connective tissue. Another important nutrient for building connective tissue is the ultimate EFAs. The EFAs act like epigenetic factors that help turn on the production of connective tissue. That is, they work genetically. They activate the connective tissue building genes, as does fatty vitamins, particularly vitamin A, also to a lesser extent vitamin D as well. But vitamin A is also important for building connective tissue. And if you want a quick, down and dirty way to ingest connective tissue building substances, bone soup, which I've been talking about for years. One of the cool things about connective tissue is when you eat connective tissue, you build connective tissue. So any way you can ingest connective tissue or connective tissue building connective tissue components like the glucogel caps or the collagen peptides, you're going to make your own connective tissue. Bone soup is another great strategy for doing that. Bone broth protein is also helpful if you can find that. When we eat protein, meat, I'll say, not protein, but when we eat meat, we don't eat the connective tissue building part of the meat. We eat the muscle component of the meat. In fact, many times we throw out the connective tissue building components of the meat. Meat is made up of, the animal is made up of the connective tissue part, the protein in the animal is made up of the connective tissue part and the muscle part. What we call steak and hamburger and ribeyes and T-bones and all the things that we love to eat so much, that's the muscle. That's not the connective tissue. In fact, the connective tissue isn't very tasty. Interestingly, though, the connective tissue, when it melts, makes the muscle more tasty. And a good steak will have marbling, and that marbling is the connective tissue. So connective tissue imparts flavor to muscle, but for the most part, the kind of meat we enjoy and that we eat in restaurants and we eat to celebrate holidays and such is the muscle, not the connective tissue. So if you're going to eat meat to build your connective tissue, make sure you're eating the connective tissue, which is the gristle or the parts of the animal that people don't like to eat, like the snouts and the hooves and the tails, right? The part that most people throw out, but that's the part that you need to build connective tissue. And this is why native populations will always eat the entire animal. They'll make soups out of the oxtail soup, for example, or the ears or the snouts of animals. All of these have the connective tissue building components for building our connective tissue. So you got vitamin C, you got the essential fats, you've got the collagen peptides, you've got the TMR shake and the Fit Shake. These are all things that you want to use on a regular basis for building your connective tissue. Also, there's certain minerals that are important. Calcium and zinc are also important for building the connective tissue. And then one of the most important strategies for building connective tissue is a non-nutritional strategy. It's movement. Exercise. When astronauts go to space, one of the things that happens is their connective tissue starts to deteriorate because connective tissue is designed to grow when it's under stress. As we put pressure on the connective tissue, electrical stimuli in response to that pressure, it's a special kind of electricity, it's called piezoelectricity. Piezo means pressure. And the pressure electricity or the piezoelectricity that's generated by stepping or by moving stimulates the growth of connective tissue. In fact, if you have surgery on your bone, if you go have a surgical procedure done or where they cut into you and the connective tissue is disturbed, they will actually give you, the surgeons will actually give you an electrical unit called a TENS unit, which you may have heard of. TENS unit stands for trans electrical neural stimulation. And that's a electrical box that actually sends electrical energy to your connective tissue to stimulate its growth. And that's because the connective tissue has an electrical nature. And the electrical nature of the connective tissue is probably more important than anything else the connective tissue does, because at the end of the day, the body is not a chemical system, it's an electrical system. And the only reason chemicals work, like nutrition works, is to the degree that they facilitate the movement of electricity. And the electrical nature of the body is largely contained and generated and conducted through the connective tissue. This is something that the Chinese knew thousands of years ago. And in fact, they developed an entire system of healing and therapy that took advantage of the electrical energy that flowed through concentrations of connective tissue. The connective tissue is found in concentrated areas of the body. These concentrated areas of the body are called meridians. And these meridians are how acupuncture works. The Chinese knew that electricity that flowed through the meridians could be manipulated for the advantages, for health advantages to the patient through needles. And so acupuncture itself takes advantage of the electrical properties of the connective tissue, and acupuncture is arguably the most successful of all medical procedures throughout history, arguably. There's other ones too you can make a case for, but certainly a case could be made for acupuncture. And along the same lines, one of the other phenomena that's associated with electrification of the connective tissue, or the connective tissue's ability to electrify substance, is the organization of fluids in the body. Now, you've probably heard that the body is made up of 60 to 70% water, right? Most people know that the body is 2/3 water or so. But what often gets missed is, how the heck is all that water in the body? If our bodies are 2/3 water, why aren't we sloshing around like a puddle every time we take a step? Right? I mean, 2/3 water. If our bodies are 2/3 water, how come when we squeeze our finger, water doesn't come out? If our body is 2/3 water, right? Isn't this kind of interesting? How could the body really be 2/3 water? But it is. That's because the 2/3 of water are a very special kind of water, a water that has substance to it. It's a form of solid water. Yes, that's not an oxymoron. The water in the body is a type of solid water, and that solidity is maintained by electricity and electrical reactions that are imparted to that water by the connective tissue. So this is why, as we age and the connective tissue deteriorates, we start to suffer from pain, because all that water starts to, instead of being structured, it now starts to become loosened and spreads apart. This is why, as we age, we blobbify. And by blobbification, I mean we just turn into a blob. There are people who freak out so much about blobbification as they get older that they'll do all kinds of surgical procedures to keep themselves from blobbifying, tummy tucks and facelifts and calf calf surgery, gastrocnemia surgery, and butt surgeries, and Ozempic, and all of these different things that we do to keep ourselves from blobbifying as we get older, when that blobbification is the end result of deterioration of the connective tissue, causing all the watery parts of our body to become sloppy. We become sloppy when we get older. You know, that's basically what happens. And the terror that we all experience is really legitimate because it means that our body is starting to turn into a puddle. That's basically what happens. Remember the Wicked Witch of the West? I'm melting, I'm melting. That's basically what happens to us. We melt, we dissolve. And that dissolving is largely the end result of deterioration of the connective tissue. So building the connective tissue is the sine qua non, the very essence of anti-aging. It can be accomplished by, number one, what you put into your body: protein, TMR shake, fish shake, collagen peptides. Oh yeah, I forgot. One of the most important elements for building connective tissue is a type of molecule called a polysaccharide. Polysaccharides form a electromagnetic seed around which the connective tissue can be built. And one of the most important, in fact, it's not as important as the mighty 90 essential nutrients, but one of the most important non-mighty 90 essential nutrients that we could ever take to anti-age, to help turn on the production of connective tissue, particularly after surgeries, because one of the things that happens after surgeries is our connective tissue starts to break down because it gets cut up. And by the way, if the connective tissue doesn't heal correctly, we end up with something called scar tissue or adhesions, which almost always occur after surgeries. And one of the most important connective tissue building substances that we can take that's not an essential nutrient is Fucoid Z, which makes Fucoid Z not just important, as everybody talks about, for fighting cancer and for strengthening the immune system, but also for healing and for anti-aging and for building and generating the connective tissue. And then also, of course, the Beyond Tangy Tangerine and the Ultimate EFAs and the OptiZinc. I mentioned the collagen peptides. These are all very important nutritional strategies in addition to eating connective tissue through bone soup, for example. These are all important nutritional strategies for building the connective tissue. The glucogel caps, the OsteoFX, and if you're doing the math in your head, the OsteoFX, now you know it's not just important for your bones. It's important for your gums. It's important for your skin. It's important for your heart. It's important for your vasculature. It's important for the fascia that wrap around all of the organs of the body. That's the OsteoFX, people. So when people take the OsteoFX for arthritis or for osteoporosis, they're improving connective tissue generation globally and systemically. And then, of course, the glucogel caps as well. And then there's what you want to avoid, which is smoking, which is sugar, and which is anything that causes disturbances at the level of the intestine. And then there's the non-nutritional strategies for building connective tissue, which is movement and exercise and walking and putting pressure on the connective tissue. And this is why I say astronauts now have trampolines or mini trampolines, rebounders in the spaceships so that they can put pressure on the connective tissue, because for many years when astronauts came back from a week in space or 2 weeks in space, they would have weak bones. And it doesn't take very long. This is one of the reasons why sitting is said to be the new smoking. So there's lots of ways to build connective tissue. Last thing I'll say, I don't know if Doc's on the call today, but he was the connective tissue doctor before he was the mineral doctor. And that's where the pig pack came from, which is, in my opinion, one of, if not the most important of longevity's non-mighty 90 essential nutrient products.
That's a lot to take
That's a
in.
lot of stuff. Okay, I didn't tell you everything, so we.
No, you didn't tell me everything. But, you know, I think you made a huge, dump into it.
For lack of a better word. For lack of a better word.
Into something that is so important that so many people, one, of course, visually, we want to look great. We don't want to blobbify. But while we're working on the outside, all of the things that's doing for the inside when we do it right.
Yes, when you do it right, you're going to build the connective tissue all over for better cardiovascular functioning, for better skin health, for better organ health, and of course for better bone health, because the bones are made of connective tissue as well.
Well, I have a new appreciation for a whole different type of food.
Yeah,
Not so much type of food, but I mean,
pig
folks,
snouts. Pig
menudo is
snouts.
really good.
What is
Okay,
menudo? I don't know what that is. What is menudo?
menudo. So it is a stew that takes up the lining, cuts up the lining of the stomach, and then cooks it over a long time. And then you add in some vegetables and other
All
things.
right.
And then another one, it's stingray.
Yeah,
And
stingray.
then
That's interesting. You remember that book that came out a few years ago, Why Sharks Don't Get Ulcers? Or no, Why Sharks Don't Get Cancer?
did hear about
Yeah,
that.
that came out in the 90s. It was all popular. It turns out that connective tissue fights disease. The immune system, connective tissue stimulates the immune system, and sharks are almost all connective tissue. Sharks are an octopus and a lot of ocean animals contain very large amounts of connective tissue, and indeed they don't get cancer. And shark cartilage has been used for centuries or even millennia as an immune booster because cartilage and connective tissue have immune boosting properties, which is one of the things I didn't tell you about. So eating connective tissue through sharks and through octopus and seafood is a great connective tissue building strategy. Also has immune boosting benefits.
Well, and then when you have what's a real tostada, not this tostada, a bunch of just a little bit of lettuce, a little bit of cheese, a little bit of meat. No, when you read a real tostada, that is loaded with shrimp and octopus and conch and stingray, and then you take the lime, squeeze it all over it. Ah, man,
Great.
the mouth just goes. So I'm super excited, and just wanted to do a shout out to the individual that introduced me to all this yumminess. But we do have questions. I know you have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Let's make it quick.
5 minutes. So one of the questions that came in early wants to know, when we're talking about sugar, does that include the foods like breads and starches that convert to sugar?
Absolutely not. The conversion to sugar slows up the release of sugar. So it's not like drinking soda pop or fruit juice where you get the sugar right into the bloodstream. But yes, the point is well taken. Flour will get turned into sugar. And you can actually take, this is one of the reasons why we love bread so much and flour so much, is because it tastes like sugar. If you chew a piece of bread very slowly in your mouth, even if it doesn't have sugar in it, it'll start to become sweet after a while as the enzymes in your saliva act on the carbohydrates in the flour. Sugar is released, and this is why we love bread so much, and why bread is considered to be a comfort food. And what a lot of folks don't realize is flour is extremely problematic. All flour. We have this conditioning that flour is somehow in the Bible and bread and is a comfort food and is healthy. No, flour today is extremely toxic. Number one, it tends to have bleaching agents, oxygenating agents to keep it white. But number two, flour is made, and also sugar, we just talked about. So you got that too. But then number three, flour often contains and is one of the most important sources in the standard American diet of rancid fat. And, Doc's been talking about don't eat seed oils, and he's been talking about this for decades, really, not to be very careful about cooking with seed oils. And now you're starting to hear more people talking about it. As always, Doc is ahead of the curve, in this case, 30 years ahead of the curve. But what's not realized is flour itself contains rancid fat in it even before it's cooked. The grains from which the flour is derived is very rich in it's a seed. It contains seed oils, and those grains are susceptible to, or the fats in the grains, the oils in the grains are susceptible to rancidity just by storage and just by processing, even before the flour has been heated to make bread. And that, of course, it exacerbates the problem and increases the rancidity.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in.
And that has to do with all flour. Gluten-free has nothing to do with that. It's all flour, gluten-free or otherwise.
Okay. All right. So next, let's go over to, and we got to make this quick. We've got about 5 questions. So Nancy, do you have a quick question for Pharmacist Ben on today's topic? Go ahead and unmute yourself. No, all right. Let's go ahead and move right over to, oh wait, she unmuted. Nancy,
Hi, Nancy.
do you have a quick question? I'm not hearing her.
We won't hear Nancy.
All right, let's move on over to, oh, I didn't mean to do that. To Phyllis. Phyllis, what question do you have for pharmacists today?
Yes, hello, Ben.
Yes.
Olga on YouTube wants to know, and she's comparing two longevity products. One is Gluco Gel Plus, that's the liquid, and that has glucosamine HCl. The Gluco Gel capsules have glucosamine sulfate 2-KCl. She wonders, can we take those both at the same time?
Yes, absolutely you can. And in fact, that reminds me, on our next episode, Becca, we should talk about sulfate and sulfur.
Okay.
So that's another thing. Yes, the sulfate's always a preferred form, just so you know. But yes, you can take both. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, and we have another question, Pharmacist Ben, and that has to do, you were talking about the epithelial lining.
Epithelial or endothelial.
Okay.
Endo or epo?
Well, well, you were talking about epi.
Yeah.
The question is, what's the difference between epithelial and endothelial?
Nothing. One's on the inside of the body, one's on the outside of the body. Endo means inside. It's the same type of tissue, except the covering epithelial tissue, epi or endothelial, both cover things, but you need coverings inside the body. For example, you have a tube which makes your circulatory system or blood vessels, right? That tube is lined with cells which function as a covering, even though it's inside. You follow what I'm saying? It's covering the inside. It's still covering, but it's covering the inside. And they refer to that kind of tissue as endothelial tissue versus epithelial tissue. Epi means above, that's on the outside of the body. So, but they're basically the same type of cellular material.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know you have a hard stop, so we're going to get you out of here on time.
Yes,
thank you, everybody. Let's give it up for Pharmacist Ben Fuchs.
Thank you, everybody.
Benjamin Fuchs. We appreciate you, Pharmacist Ben. Have a fantastic day.
God bless you all.
We'll
nice to see you
next week. God bless you as well, too.
Bye,
if
everybody.
I could get co-hosts up with me, that would be absolutely fantastic, as I could not do the show without them. I just want to do a huge shout out and say thank you to the team for keeping the programming going while I was out and not just having fun, folks. Okay, I was nourishing my body. But thank you so much, Ruth Ellen, for filling in as the hostess for the shows. And AJ and Ruth Ellen and Gary, who's not here with us, as they were running replays on the days that we did not have a guest. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We have Kaylee, who is helping us with our social media presence. Thank you, Kaylee. We have Phyllis, who's been with Longevity the longest of any of us, and who originally was her and her husband originally part of getting Dr. Wallach and the Dead Doctors Don't Lie show on the air. So thank you so much, Phyllis and Andy. We have over way down in South Africa who is letting people into the room so that they can get in and hear the information, see the content that's being shared in the chat, and also raise a hand if you have questions. So we'll see you next time, folks. And Marilyn, thank you, Marilyn, for putting yourself up there, as she is the one that is putting the majority of the information into the chat. And we just want to do a shout out for all of you who joined us live here today, as we appreciate our studio audience, as yes, we are live. And you can catch us during the week from 12 to 1 p.m. Pacific time, 1 to 2 Mountain, 2 to 3 Central, 3 to 4 Eastern. And folks, you can catch us around the clock 24/7 by going to live.dailywithdoc.com and catch us on any of your favorite programming platforms whenever you have a hankering to get more information to help you know what to feed your body so that you're not just barely surviving on that RDA stuff, but thriving. My name is Becca Dukes. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Daily with Doc and Becca. Make sure that you get back with the person that shared this program with you. They cared enough about you and took the time to share this program. So take the time to get back with them and say, thank you. Share with them what you learned most about the program. And if you have any questions in regards to any of like the products or nutrients that Pharmacist Ben or myself asked on the program, they are your first point of contact. Now, if nobody referred you to the program, you found us all on your own, and you would like to speak with a certified holistic health coach, I do have a call team standing by at 855-949-3377. This is for people that are not already working with anybody and were not referred. Again, that number is 855-949-3377. This program is being sponsored by dailywithdoc.com. And I just thank you as the host of this program for investing time into yourself, caring enough about yourself to learn what it's going to take to help support this amazing creation that you were given to take care of. Share this program with somebody you know and love. Make sure you subscribe to our channels. And if you have any questions, you can send questions into questions@dailywithdoc.com. Again, that's questions@dailywithdoc.com. If you would like more information about how you can be part of the team, get back with a person and share this program with you. Again, if there's no one to thank, info@dailywithdoc.com. We'll make sure that we get some information to you. Let us know what skills, what you have within you that you want to share to help promote a message that is benefiting the world. Benefiting the world. You never know what an impact that's going to make on your own life, on the life of somebody else from 15 months later. Anyways, have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody, and we'll see you next week on Daily with Doc. Bye for now. Welcome to Daily with Doc and Becca. This program is for educational purposes only. The statements in this program have not been evaluated by the FDA. The content is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, nor is it intended to take the place of your primary care physician. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual sharing their testimony. Results vary and may not be typical. We do not make any claims regarding health or income. As an empowered individual, you do have options available. We are honored to have a founding father of the science of epigenetics guiding us with the best options to obtain or maintain optimal health, Dr. Joel Wallach.